Have you ever wondered how Native Americans stayed warm without blankets? Their methods will surely surprise you. In the frigid prairies of the Great Plains, where winter winds chill you to the bone, indigenous peoples thrived for centuries without a single wool blanket. They did not have modern insulation, but their understanding of the laws of physics, nature, and engineering was so profound that it allowed them to sleep warm even in the harshest frosts. Their homes were not just shelters, but complex heat management systems, and their beds were multi-layered structures created from the gifts of the surrounding nature. Watch the video to the end to learn how Native Americans turned bison hides, rabbit fur, and even simple grass into effective protection from the cold, allowing them to survive where others could not. What if I told you that everything you believed about Native American dwellings is not entirely accurate? The tipis of the Great Plains peoples are not just conical huts made of skins. They are ingenious engineering structures designed to actively manage heat and airflow. The cone shape was not chosen at random. It provided maximum stability in the strong winds of the prairies, which could blow away any rectangular structure. In addition, this shape promoted proper air circulation inside the dwelling. A key element of the heating system was the inner screen, or lining, known to the Lakota as ozon. This lining, made of skins or fabric, was attached to the tipi poles at human height, not reaching the very top or the ground. It created a vital air gap between the outer wall and the living space. This air gap worked like a thermos. It insulated the interior from the cold exterior of the tipi, preventing the cold from penetrating inside. In winter, the temperature difference between the interior and exterior walls could be very significant. In addition, the ozone played a key role in ventilation. Cold air entering under the outer edge of the tipi hit the lining and rushed upward through the air channel. It did not enter the living space and did not create drafts on the floor. This upward airflow picked up smoke from the central hearth and carried it outside through the smoke vents at the top. Thus, the inside of the tipi was always filled with fresh, smoke-free air. It was a true supply and exhaust ventilation system. At the top of the tipi were two smoke vents, a kind of ears that could be controlled with special poles. Depending on the direction of the wind, they could be turned to protect the hearth from rain and snow. They were also used to regulate the draft, as in a chimney. In cold weather, the valves were almost completely closed, leaving only a small opening for smoke to escape. This allowed the warm air to be retained inside as much as possible. In warm weather, on the contrary, they were open wide for better ventilation. Thus, the tipi was not a static shelter, but a dynamic system. Its inhabitants could constantly adjust the microclimate inside, responding to the slightest changes in the weather. It was a true art to live in harmony with the harsh nature. How much do you think modern architects could learn from the creators of the tipi? Share your opinion in the comments. Want to know the secret that has kept entire peoples warm for millennia? The basis of warmth in any Native American dwelling was the bed, and its main element was the bison hide. It was not just a covering, but a universal tool for survival. Buffalo hides obtained in winter were particularly valuable. By this time, the animals had grown thick, dense fur with a warm undercoat. Such hides were incredibly warm and served as ideal insulators. The process of processing the hides was long and laborious. After removal, the hide was cleaned of fat and flesh residues with special scrapers. This stage was very important, as the quality and durability of the future product depended on it. This was followed by a tanning process, which made the skin soft and elastic. Indigenous peoples used a method known as brain tanning. Animal brains contain emulsifying substances that soften the fibers of the skin. After applying the mixture, the skin was kneaded and stretched by hand for a long time. This process could take many hours. As a result, the rough and stiff skin was transformed into a soft, suede-like material. For sleeping, bison hides were used as a multifunctional element. They could be laid on the floor with the fur side down. In this case, the thick fur created an air cushion that insulated the sleeper from the cold ground. Most often, the hides served as blankets. One large and heavy winter skin could cover several people at once. Its warmth was so effective that it was possible to sleep under it even in severe frost. A bison hide was not only used as bedding, it was used for shelter during travel in cold weather as a cloak or cape. It was an integral part of the life and daily routine of the peoples of the Great Plains. The thick fur did not shed and retained heat well. It was durable and lasted for decades, being passed down from generation to generation. Losing a bison robe in winter was tantamount to a serious threat to life. But one's skin, no matter how warm it was, could not protect against the piercing cold of the subarctic. Are you ready to learn how the northern peoples created blankets from hundreds of tiny skins, turning them into a single weightless and warm fabric? I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the northern craftsman. In the subarctic regions where there were no bison and the winters were even harsher, the Cree and Athabascan peoples developed a unique technology. They created incredibly warm blankets woven from the fur of ordinary white hares. It was an extremely laborious but very effective technique. Dozens, even hundreds of hare skins were needed to make one such blanket. Hunting them was an important part of winter fishing. After obtaining the skins, they were carefully removed and dried. Then each skin was cut in a spiral into one long, thin strip of fur. The width of this strip was only about a centimeter. Then the most amazing stage began. These fur strips were slightly twisted, turning them into a kind of fur yarn. The wool ended up on the outside, creating a fluffy and soft thread. When a sufficient amount of such yarn was ready, the weaving process began. The craftsmen used a simple frame loom on which they stretched a base made of tendons or plant fibers. It was on this base that the future blanket was woven. The fur threads were passed through the base, creating a dense and fluffy fabric. The technique resembled the weaving of baskets or mats. The result was a product that was both light and extremely warm. The secret of this blanket lay in its structure. Thousands of fur hairs created a huge number of tiny air pockets. It was this immobile air that was the main heat insulator. Such a rabbit fur blanket was much lighter than a heavy bison skin, but in terms of its thermal characteristics, it was almost as good. It was soft, pleasant to the touch, and did not restrict movement during sleep. It was the ideal solution for the mobile lifestyle of hunters. The process of making one blanket could take weeks of painstaking work. This was mainly done by women during long winter evenings. This art was passed down from mother to daughter. These unique fur fabrics were a real lifesaver in the extreme north. They are a striking example of how human ingenuity can transform a humble natural material into what was, at the time, a high-tech insulator. What I am about to show may seem obvious, but that was the genius of it. Native Americans never, under any circumstances, slept on the bare ground. Creating the right multi-layered bedding was just as important as building a fire. The first layer always served as insulation from the moisture and cold of the ground. In forested regions, they used pine branches from coniferous trees such as spruce or fir. They laid them in a thick, springy layer on the site of the future bed. The needles created a thick air layer that blocked the cold coming from the ground. In addition, they were soft and fragrant, which made sleeping more comfortable. This layer had to be renewed regularly. In regions where coniferous trees were scarce, dry grass or reeds were used. They were also laid in a thick layer, creating an insulating cushion. The main task was to raise the sleeping area above the cold surface. Woven mats or mats were laid on top of this base layer. They were made from a variety of materials, reeds, cattails, and cedar bark. These mats created a flat and clean surface for sleeping. Mat weaving was an important craft. The mats were durable, lightweight, and flexible. They could be easily rolled up and taken along when migrating. Only skins were laid on top of the mats. Most often, these were deer, elk, or bear skins, which served as mattresses. They were placed fur side up to make them softer and warmer. The final layer was a blanket, which was used to cover the bed. This could be the same bison robe or a rabbit blanket. This created a multi-layered sleeping system. Each layer in this system performed a specific function. Remove even one, and the effectiveness of the entire structure would be drastically reduced. This was a deep understanding of the principles of thermal insulation. But how could a large space be heated without suffocating from smoke? In the next chapter, you will learn about the smart fire control system in traditional dwellings. The central hearth was the heart of any traditional dwelling. It provided not only heat but also light, the ability to cook food, and a place for the whole family to gather. However, improper handling of fire in a confined space could be very dangerous. Indigenous peoples were masters of the art of fire management. They never built large, smoky fires. Their hearths were small, neat, and very efficient. Only dry wood from certain tree species was used for the fire. Such wood burned hot with almost no smoke and left behind a lot of coals. This was key to retaining heat. The hearth in the teepee was not located strictly in the center, but was slightly offset towards the entrance. This created better draft and directed the airflow so that the smoke escaped more efficiently through the upper openings. It was a simple but ingenious aerodynamic trick. The fire was not completely extinguished at night. It was kept smoldering, with hot coals preserved under a layer of ash. This allowed the flames to be quickly rekindled in the morning and provided a constant source of low heat throughout the night. These smoldering coals created infrared radiation that heated the objects around them. The floor, walls, and people absorbed this radiant heat. Even without an open flame, the dwelling remained at a comfortable temperature. Sometimes stones were used to accumulate heat. They were heated in the fire and then laid out around the perimeter of the dwelling. The hot stones slowly gave off heat, acting as passive heaters. This approach required constant attention and a deep understanding of the combustion process. It was not just a matter of building a fire, but of finely tuning the heat balance throughout the dwelling. The survival of the family depended directly on this skill. Fire was not just a source of heat, but a living being that demanded respect and care. It was treated with reverence, observing certain rituals. This was the basis of the culture and way of life of many tribes. Thus, heating a dwelling was an active process. It required knowledge, skill, and constant labor. But the result was worth it. Warmth and safety in the middle of a cold winter night. Are you ready for the shocking truth about winter clothing? The main secret to retaining heat is not the thickness of the material, but the amount of air it can hold. Indigenous peoples intuitively understood this principle and built their entire winter clothing system on it. Their clothing was never tight or restrictive. It was loose and consisted of several layers. It was the air trapped between these layers that was the main insulator. The bottom layer, which was next to the body, was made of soft, well-tanned deer or elk skin. This material, treated with a brain tanning technique, was as soft as fabric and absorbed moisture well. This allowed the body to stay dry. Looser shirts and leggings were worn over it. This created the first air pocket. The air in it was heated by body heat and remained still, creating an insulating barrier. In severe frosts, a fur-lined cape or the same bison robe could be used as an outer layer. This added another warmer layer. This multi-layered system was lightweight and did not restrict movement. Special attention was paid to the feet. Winter moccasins were made loose so that dry grass or rabbit fur could be placed inside as insoles. This provided additional insulation from the frozen ground. A kind of leather or fur gaiters could be worn over the moccasins. They protected the feet from snow and cold. The whole system was thought out to the smallest detail. It was important not to overheat or sweat. If it got hot while walking, the top layer could be easily removed. Clothes wet with sweat quickly freeze in the cold and lose all their insulating properties. This approach to clothing required an understanding of one's body and the environment. It was not just clothing, but a personal climate control system. It allowed people to stay comfortable both at home and during long winter journeys. But even the warmest clothes in the best house are useless if you don't know how to use them properly. In the next chapter, we will talk about sleeping techniques that allowed people to conserve precious heat. An important element of the heating system was the person themselves and their family. In harsh conditions, survival was a collective effort, and this applied even to such a simple process as sleep. People used the warmth of their bodies to keep each other warm. In the large, long houses of the Iroquois, where several families lived under one roof, the mere presence of a large number of people raised the temperature. The breath and body heat of dozens of people created a warmer microclimate. This was an important factor that complemented the heat from the hearths. In the tipis of the Plains peoples, the family slept in a specific order. Sleeping places were arranged in a circle along the walls of the dwelling. Feet were always directed toward the central hearth so that the limbs would not freeze. Members of the same family slept close to each other. This simple action significantly reduced heat loss for each person. The heat radiated by one body warmed another. Sometimes the whole family was covered with one or two large bison skins. This shared covering created a closed, warm space. It was much more effective than each person covering themselves separately. This way of sleeping was not only practical, but also had a deep social meaning. It strengthened family ties and created a sense of community and security. This was especially important during the long, dark winter nights. Even the location of the sleeping places in the dwelling was important. The most honorable and warmest places at the back wall of the teepee, opposite the entrance, were occupied by the host and the older members of the family. The places at the entrance, where it could be cooler, were intended for young people. Everything was subordinated to the logic of preserving precious heat. Every detail of daily life, every aspect of social organization worked toward a common goal: to survive the winter. It was a holistic and well-thought-out system. Thus, warmth was provided not only by technology, but also by social behavior. Mutual assistance was not an abstract concept, but a physical necessity. People literally warmed each other with their body heat. This collective approach to survival was one of the main strengths of indigenous peoples. It allowed them to thrive in conditions that might seem unbearable. Strength lay in unity, even during sleep. We have already discussed the importance of insulation from the ground, but some peoples went even further. In the culture of the Iroquois and other tribes of the eastern woodlands who lived in permanent longhouses, it was common practice to sleep on raised platforms. This was a simple and very effective way to avoid the cold. The longhouse was a huge frame structure covered with bark. Inside, along the walls, at a height of about 1 meter from the ground, wide platforms or bunks were constructed. It was on these platforms that the sleeping places for all the inhabitants of the house were located. The physics behind this solution are simple. Cold air is always heavier than warm air and accumulates at the bottom near the floor. By raising the sleeping area just 1 meter, people found themselves in a zone of warmer air. These sleeping platforms were quite wide. They had enough space not only for sleeping, but also for storing personal belongings. The space under the platforms was also used to store firewood and supplies. The platforms themselves were covered as carefully as the floor of the teepee. First, a thick layer of woven mats was laid down. On top of them, animal skins, most often bear or deer, were spread out to serve as mattresses. Each family had its own space on these communal bunks. It was separated from the neighbor's space by skins or woven curtains. This created a feeling of comfort and personal space within the large communal house. The heat from the central hearth, of which there were several in the longhouse, rose upwards. It warmed the upper part of the room where the sleeping people were located. In this way, they got the maximum benefit from the fire. This way of life was possible thanks to a sedentary lifestyle. The construction of the longhouse and its interior decoration was a collective effort of the entire community. It was a capital structure designed to last for many years. The practice of using raised beds shows how deeply forest peoples understood the laws of convection. They not only heated the air in their dwellings, but also placed people exactly where the air was warmest. It was real everyday thermodynamics. This example proves once again that survival methods were closely linked to lifestyle and environment. The nomads of the plains and the settled farmers of the forests found different but equally ingenious solutions to the same problem. Behind the success of all these methods was a deep knowledge of the properties of materials. Indigenous peoples were true experts in material science, perfectly understanding the characteristics of different types of fur and leather. They knew exactly which material was best suited for which purpose. They understood the difference between winter and summer fur. The winter fur of any animal is always thicker and warmer because it has a dense undercoat, short, fluffy hairs that trap air well. It was this type of fur that was valued for making warm clothing and bedding. The structure of the fur was also important. For example, beaver fur was particularly valuable because of its density and water-repellent properties. Rabbit fur, as we already know, was very light and fluffy, ideal for making weightless blankets. Bison hides combined durable leather with thick, warm fur. This made them a versatile material. They could be used to make clothing, bedding, and even teepee covers. Leather without fur also varied in its properties. Deerskin, when properly tanned, became incredibly soft, durable, and breathable. It was ideal for undergarments. Moose leather was thicker and stronger than deer leather. It was used to make moccasins and outerwear that had to withstand heavy loads. Each material had its own niche. The process of treating the hides was aimed at preserving and improving their natural properties. Brain tanning did not damage the fibers of the leather, but made them elastic and durable. Smoking with smoke gave the leather water-repellent properties and a pleasant smell. This knowledge was not recorded in books. It was accumulated over centuries, through trial and error, and passed down from generation to generation. The craft of leather processing was one of the most respected arts. In essence, indigenous peoples used natural composite materials. They took what nature provided and perfected it through their processing. Their clothing and bedding were the result of a deep understanding of the world around them. It was this knowledge of materials that was the foundation on which all other survival technologies were built. Without the ability to turn rough hides into soft clothing or warm fur, no other method would have worked. In conclusion, it is important to understand that all of the methods described were not separate tricks. They only work together as parts of a single, holistic system. Remove one element and the entire structure could collapse. A properly constructed dwelling, such as a tipi or a longhouse, was only the first level of protection. It created a microclimate that was significantly better than the conditions outside. But on its own, it could not provide comfortable sleep in the cold. The second level was a properly organized bed, multi-layered insulation from the ground, a soft mattress made of skins, and a warm top cover created a personal comfort zone for the sleeper. It was a shell within a shell. The third level was clothing. Even in their sleep, people often kept some of their daytime clothes on. This was the last barrier to keep the heat close to the body. The fourth and perhaps most important layer was the human factor. Managing the fire, sleeping together to conserve heat, and constantly caring for the dwelling and clothing all required knowledge, discipline, and collective effort. This system was perfectly adapted to specific conditions. The peoples of the plains created a mobile system based on bison resources. Forest tribes developed a stationary system using the gifts of the forest. At the heart of it all was observation. Indigenous peoples observed nature, animal behavior, and plant properties for centuries. They learned from the world rather than trying to conquer it. Their technologies were not primitive. They were simply different, based on deep integration with the environment rather than changing it. It was a technology of harmony, not domination. Today, in the age of central heating and synthetic materials, it is difficult for us to imagine such a life. But it was this system that allowed people not only to survive, but also to thrive in the harshest climatic conditions of North America. The story of how Native Americans slept warm is not just a set of survival tips. It is a lesson in wisdom, ingenuity, and deep respect for the world that was their home. We see that the secret to the warmth of indigenous peoples was not the availability of blankets, but a comprehensive approach. It was an ingenious system that included engineering solutions for housing, a deep knowledge of materials, the right clothing, and social interaction. They created comfort where it seemed impossible. Every element of this system, from the shape of the tipi to the way rabbit skins were cut, had been refined over centuries and perfected. This legacy reminds us that human ingenuity knows no bounds, and that the most effective solutions often lie in harmony with nature, not in fighting it. Please suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.